When the bell calls the dead. On the night the bell in Kyiv rang by itself, people did not leave their homes, no one rushed to the church, no one ran to the walls with a spear, because everyone knew, when a bell rings without human hands, it does not call the living. Fog rose from the Dnipro and crept upward through the streets, between wooden houses, up to the very walls of the citadel. Kyiv froze. Even the dogs were silent. Stanimir woke as if someone had yanked a hook from his chest. He lay in the darkness, listening, counting each strike. Slow, heavy, unhurried. The bell did not panic. It judged. He had heard that sound before, years ago, on a battlefield, when the wounded begged for water, and the dead looked suddenly weightless. A bell like that did not warn you of danger. It warned you that danger had already entered. At dawn he was summoned. The princely chamber was cold, though embers still glowed in the brazier. Fur and steel lined the walls. The prince stood with his back turned, staring out the window where fog still clung to the city like a veil. "People are talking," he said without turning. "People always talk," Stanimir replied. This time, too loudly. The prince turned. His eyes were tired but firm. "They gather at night in Podil," he said. "They speak of hunger, of tribute growing heavier than bread. They speak of a prince who has forgotten why he sits on the throne." Stanimir said nothing. Silence was safer than agreement. "You will go there," the prince continued. "You will learn who leads them, and you will stop it." "How?" Stanimir asked quietly. The prince's mouth lifted in a thin, almost friendly smile. "The way you know how." It was not an order. It was a trial. A rope placed around his neck, loose enough to pretend it was not there. Stanimir entered the city without a weapon, only his cloak. Kyiv woke slowly. People avoided his eyes. Market stalls stood half empty, as if even merchants feared to display abundance. As he crossed toward Podil, he noticed small things. Locked doors in daytime, bundles of sticks piled near thresholds, men standing in pairs instead of alone. A city does not do that unless it expects a storm. In Podil, the silence was thicker than the fog. Near an old granary stood a woman with a child. She pressed the boy to her chest as if Stanimir might take him as well. Her face was pale, her hands chapped and red from cold. "You are from the Druzhina," she said. "So you have come when it is already too late." "Too late for what?" Stanimir asked. "For fear," she replied. "We are no longer afraid." Those words struck harder than any blade. Fear was the chain that kept order. If it snapped, everything else followed. She did not run from him. She pointed with a nod toward a narrow passage between two huts. "If you came to listen," she said, "go there. If you came to kill, then do it in the open, so the city can see what its prince has become." Stanimir walked the passage and descended into a cellar beneath a ruined storehouse. The air smelled of damp earth and old grain. A dozen people sat close together. Craftsmen, fishermen, a boy with soot on his cheeks, an old man with a bandaged hand. They did not whisper. They spoke calmly, like people who had already decided they would not crawl anymore. A broad-shouldered man stood when Stanimir entered. Not a noble, not a warrior. A cooper by the look of his hands. Hard, cracked, honest. "We do not want blood," the man said. "We want to be heard." Stanimir studied him. "If you wanted to be heard," he said, "you would go to the prince in daylight." A bitter laugh ran through the cellar. "And be beaten in daylight," someone answered. "And be dragged away so our children can watch?" The cooper's eyes held no madness, only exhaustion. "We pay. We work. We bury our dead. And still they ask for more. Tell your prince, we have nothing left to give but our names, and we will not give those either. Stanimir felt the weight of the prince's command pressing against his ribs. Find the leader, make the others fall silent. In the old days he would have done it. One clean cut, one body, a lesson, but the bell from last night still echoed in his bones. He looked around the cellar and realized something colder than fear. These people were not led by one man. They were led by hunger, by winter, by empty hands. When Stanimir climbed back into the street, the sky had darkened again. Wind pushed the fog into long, torn ribbons. Somewhere nearby, a shout rose, and then another. Flames appeared at the edge of Podil. Someone had thrown a torch into a storehouse. Fire climbed fast on dry wood, eager and bright. In a heartbeat, the glow painted faces red. Frightened faces, angry faces, faces that had been waiting for an excuse. Stanimir ran toward the noise. Men shouted accusations about stolen grain, about hidden coin, about the prince's men. Someone grabbed a bucket. Someone grabbed a club. And then the first stone flew. That was how cities died. Above it all, the bell rang again. Not frantic, not screaming, steady, heavy, like a judge striking a table. Stanimir turned and ran uphill to the belfry. Inside, the ropes hung still. No hands pulled them. Yet the bell moved, slow as breathing, and each strike seemed to land inside his skull. For a moment he thought of the old stories, of saints and curses, of bells that rang when murder was near. Then he understood. The bell was not magic. The bell was a mirror. It rang because the city itself was shaking, because men were climbing the tower, because someone, somewhere, was pulling at fate. He stepped to the rope and gripped it. Now he stood between two murders. If he named names, the Druzhina would sweep Podil clean with steel. If he remained silent, the crowd would tear the city apart with bare hands. He remembered his father's words. Rus stands on the line between fear and conscience. Stanimir pulled the rope. Not as a warrior, as a human being. The bell boomed across Kyiv. People stopped mid-step. Even the fire seemed to hesitate. Heads lifted toward the sound, and in that brief pause, the city remembered itself. Wives, sons, neighbors, the shared winter, the shared river, the shared graves. By morning the prince knew. Stanimir stood before him without helmet, without excuses. "You have betrayed me," the prince said. "I have kept your city from drowning," Stanimir replied. "And I have kept you from becoming the kind of ruler whose bell rings for the dead." The prince's jaw tightened. For a moment it looked like he would order Stanimir's head taken then and there. But a prince does not kill a man he still needs. Not publicly. Not yet. "You will leave," the prince said at last. "You will go where your conscience can feed you. Banished. Without honor. Without a name. Without a home." Stanimir walked along the Dnipro as the sun rose pale behind the fog. Kyiv fell behind him. Quiet again, but not healed. A city does not heal in one night. It only survives. And for years afterward, people argued about who rang the bell. Some said God. Some said a curse. Some said a brave man. Stanimir never corrected them. He simply kept walking, knowing one thing. Sometimes the greatest loyalty is the courage to say no.